Welcome to What Makes a Good Spot. In this video, I discuss what I look for in a spot for model horse photography. My family used to always wonder what I was looking for when I was hunting for photography spots. I shrugged off spots they suggested because they were no good and found other spots that they thought was no different from the rest of the trail. With experience, you will eventually develop an eye for spots that complement your photography style. While standing, you'll be able to decide whether a spot will look good for models or not. The first thing I look for is if I will be able to get my camera at eye level or below of the model. Using a telephoto lens, you will need drastically more space for this. Oftentimes, little hills in a trail is the perfect spot to place your model. These little hills will also help you get below the model more and open up the option to having the sky at the top of the photo. The next thing I consider is what the background behind the model is going to look like. I avoid spots where the trail immediately turns and the background would be a bush. This is just a solid background and not that interesting. If the trail continues straight for quite a ways, it has potential. I also look for there to be a variety of colors in the background to keep things interesting. I quite like having a bit of a story to the background, telling where the model is. Is it the mountains, the beach, a forest, a field? I avoid plain backgrounds when possible. Additionally, I have to make sure there will be nothing obstructing the shot. Nothing is worse than when there's a rock right in your way, or if there's weeds and grass you can't avoid. Lighting is another big factor. I will not stop for photos in a particularly dark spot of the forest, as it will just be a low light battle. Areas that are brighter are better suited for photos. That said, I'm not necessarily looking for a sunny spot. Shade is perfectly fine, and sometimes preferable. I'm looking for a spot that is bright. I also take into consideration if the foreground and the background are similarly lit. If the background is much brighter, then it's usually going to be blown out in the photos. This can be tackled a bit with multiple exposures, but that requires a lot more editing time, and it's not always worth it. I also look and see if the grass or rocks or whatever the surface is going to be in scale. I have tips for dealing with out-of-scale situations, but they don't work for everyone. Beaches can be difficult to take photos at. Quite often the sand is sloped too steeply down to the water. To navigate this, I typically take photos more lengthwise down the beach. If the beach is busy, you'll unfortunately have a more difficult time getting your photos through the people. Some things that I am not concerned about baffles people. Power lines is one. Power lines almost never show up in my photos. Often, once my camera is zoomed in, the power line is just above the image. If your aperture is set low enough, the power lines will not be visible in the image either. In the event that they are visible, at least they're normally in the sky and very easy to edit out in Photoshop. Don't let power lines deter you away from an otherwise great spot. Moving cars is another thing that I am not usually concerned by. Yes, they're annoying, but they move. They'll be out of the picture in a second. I often take my photos in between passing cars. Sometimes the best way to see if a spot is good is just placing a model down and pulling out the camera. Some spots just aren't going to be what you're looking for, even if they originally looked promising. The more you take photos and try different locations, the better you will become at seeing a spot.